Dayu. On her wedding day, she's brutally abandoned at the altar, pregnant and humiliated. He, Brian, the best man and the groom's brother, who secretly loves her, witnesses the scene. Driven by her pain, he kneels, consoles her, and proposes right. There at the altar, "Amanda, I won't let you be alone. Will you marry me?" It's a proposal of salvation born from a hidden love. Prepare for a twist where a marriage of compassion defies fate. But compassion and loyalty heal broken hearts and prove that true love blossoms in the ruins. Stay tuned to the end. You'll be surprised. If you love love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment. We post videos like this every day. Moving on. The day dawned like any other for Amanda Mendez, but she knew it would be special. After 3 years of dating, finally, Ryan Sterling had set the date. 26 years old, wavy brown hair that fell over her shoulders, and hazel eyes that reflected a genuine sweetness. Amanda worked as a kindergarten teacher at a public school in the suburbs of Chicago. Every morning, she faced 2 crowded buses to get to the north side, where she earned just above minimum wage, but found purpose in every child's smile. On that specific morning, she held the blood test results in her hands. Pregnant. The word danced in her mind like a sweet and frightening melody at the same time. At 26, she had always dreamed of being a mother, but not like this. Not now, when she could barely afford the rent on the small apartment she shared with 2 college roommates. Across town, in the luxurious office on the 40th floor of a skyscraper on Michigan Avenue, Brian Sterling analyzed architectural designs with the precision of a surgeon. At 38, he was the CEO of Sterling Construction, an empire. He had built brick by brick since taking over the company after his father's death 10 years earlier. His strong hands, accustomed to the weight of responsibility, flipped through multi-million-dollar contracts, while his dark gray eyes maintained the same intensity he applied to everything in life. Brian was known for his professional coldness, but few knew the loneliness he carried. He had never married, never had serious relationships that lasted more than a few weeks. There was always something missing, a connection he never found, except Amanda, his younger brother, Ryan's girlfriend, whom he had met 3 years earlier at a family party. Since then, a silent and impossible love had grown in his chest, fueled by every forced encounter, every family dinner where he had to feign indifference. Ryan Sterling, at 32, lived in the shadow of his older brother. Graduated in marketing at the insistence of his family, he worked in a position created especially for him in the company, but everyone knew that his true passions were parties, luxury cars, and the life without commitments that family money allowed. Amanda represented for him just another conquest, a sweet and beautiful girlfriend who impressed his friends, but never awakened in him the desire to build something real. That day, Amanda called Ryan with her heart racing. "Ryan, I need to see you. I have important news." He, on the other end of the line, was at a poker table with friends at the club, annoyed by the interruption. "What news, babe? Can't it wait? I'm in an important meeting." Amanda hesitated, but anxiety took over. "I'm pregnant, Ryan." The silence that followed lasted eternal seconds. Ryan felt the world spin around him. Pregnant, baby, responsibility, everything he had always carefully avoided. I need to process this, Amanda. I'll call you later." And he hung up, leaving her alone with the phone in her hand and tears starting to form in her eyes. 3 days passed without news from Ryan. Amanda called, sent messages, but received only evasive answers. "I'm traveling for work. We need to talk in person. Everything will be okay." On the 4th morning, she woke up to a call from Carla, the wedding planner. "Amanda, honey, Ryan cancelled everything, said there will be no more wedding. I'm very confused. Can you clarify what happened?" Amanda's world collapsed. "He cancelled the wedding. without even having the courage to talk to her in person. She sat on the kitchen floor of the apartment and cried until she had no more tears. Pregnant, abandoned, and without money to support a child alone. The teacher, who had always believed in happy endings, who read fairy tales to children every day, discovered that real life could be much crueler than any story. That same day, Brian received an angry call from his mother. "Your brother has gone crazy, Brian. He cancelled the wedding with that sweet girl without giving any explanations. He said he will travel abroad, that he needs to find himself. What a shame for our family." Brian felt a mixture of anger and something he couldn't name. Anger at Ryan for being so cowardly and irresponsible, and a strange pang in his chest at the thought of Amanda being free, but probably devastated. It was then that his secretary entered the office. "Mr. Sterling, there's a call from Ms. Amanda Mendez. She says it's urgent and that she needs to speak with you about Ryan." Brian felt his heart race. Amanda had never called him directly. Something was very wrong. Brian accepted the call with slightly trembling hands, unusual for a man who commanded meetings with millions at stake without blinking. "Amanda?" His voice came out softer than he intended. On the other end of the line, she sobbed quietly before she could speak. "Brian, I didn't know who else to turn to. Ryan..." Her voice broke completely. "Where are you?" Brian was already getting up from his chair, grabbing his car keys. "At home. He cancelled everything, Brian. The wedding, the plans, everything, and I am..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't leave the house." During the drive to Amanda's modest apartment on the north side, Brian fought against conflicting feelings. Anger at Ryan for abandoning a woman like Amanda. Guilt for feeling a secret satisfaction with the end of the engagement. And a genuine concern that consumed him. Amanda seemed devastated, and it hurt him in a way he didn't expect. When she opened the door, Brian had to control himself not to take her in his arms immediately. Amanda was visibly dejected, her eyes red from crying so much, wearing an oversized t-shirt and sweatpants. Still, or perhaps because of it, she seemed more beautiful than ever. There was a genuine fragility that awakened all protective instincts. In him. "Come in, please." Favor. She led him to the small living room where they sat on the used couch she had bought from a second-hand furniture store. "Brian, I don't know what to do. I'm pregnant." The words came out like a painful confession. "And Ryan, he's disappeared, cancelled everything without even having the courage to talk to me." Brian felt the world stop. Pregnant. Amanda was pregnant with his brother's child and had been abandoned. The anger he felt at that moment for Ryan was so intense that he had to clench his fists to control himself. "How long have you known?" His voice was hoarse, laden with emotions he struggled to hide. 3 days. That's when I told him." Amanda wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I thought he would be happy, that maybe he would move up the wedding. But Brian, he just ran away, like a coward." The last word came out with a bitterness he had never heard in Amanda's sweet voice. Brian got up and walked to the window, needing a moment to process everything. Amanda, pregnant and abandoned. His brother running away from responsibility as he always did when things got serious. And he was there, among the wreckage, fighting against the desire to comfort her in every possible way. "Amanda, do you have family? Someone who can help you?" She shook her head negatively. "My parents died in an accident when I was 18. I have an aunt upstate, but we drifted apart years ago." The loneliness in her voice was palpable. "Brian, I don't know how I'm going to raise a child alone. My salary barely pays my bills." When he turned to look at her again, Amanda had her arms wrapped around her own body, as if trying to protect herself from more pain. Her vulnerability awakened an overwhelming tenderness in Brian. He knelt in front of the couch, getting down to her eye level. "You're not alone, Amanda. I'm going to help you." "You don't have to," she began, but he interrupted with a wave of his hand. "I need to, yes. Ryan is my brother, and what he did is unforgivable. But that doesn't mean you and your baby should pay for it." Amanda looked at him with an expression of surprise and something more, a spark of hope that she was trying to stifle. "Why would you do that? We barely know each other." A lie, and they both knew it. In Ryan's 3 years of dating, there had been countless family dinners, parties, casual encounters where they talked more than they should, where their gazes lingered longer than appropriate. Brian hesitated, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. How to explain that he knew her better than he should, that he had memorized the way she smiled when she talked about the children at school, how her eyes sparkled when she discussed literature, how her genuine laughter was different from the polite laughter she used with strangers. "We know each other more than you think, Amanda." The air between them was charged with an electric tension. Amanda felt her heart race for a reason completely different from the anxiety of the last few days. There was something in the way Brian looked at her, an intensity that had always made her uncomfortable when she was with Ryan, because she knew that there shouldn't be that current between her and her boyfriend's brother. "Brian, she began, but his phone rang, breaking the moment. It was from the company, an emergency that required his immediate presence at a construction site that could collapse. He answered with irritation, his eyes never leaving Amanda's face. "I have to go," he said, after hanging up. "But we need to talk properly about this. You can't go through this alone." He got up, hesitating at the door. "Amanda, promise you won't make any drastic decisions until we talk again." She nodded, confused by the conflicting feelings that Brian aroused in her. Gratitude, relief, but also something dangerous that she shouldn't be feeling. "Thank you, Brian, for caring." After he left, Amanda realized that for the first time in days, she didn't feel completely lost. But she also realized that accepting Brian's help would mean diving into much more dangerous waters than she imagined. The next morning, Amanda woke up to the doorbell ringing insistently. Still in her nightgown, with her hair disheveled, she opened the door and was faced with 2 uniformed men carrying boxes. "Delivery for Amanda Mendez," said one of them, extending a clipboard for her to sign. "There must be a mistake," she began, but she saw the card attached to one of the boxes. Brian's elegant handwriting read only, "So you and the baby don't go without B." The boxes contained prenatal vitamins, organic food, selected fruits, and even maternity clothes from expensive brands. Amanda felt a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. On one hand, Brian's practical concern touched her deeply. On the other, she felt like a charity case, and it hurt her pride. She picked up the phone and called him, but it went straight to his secretary. "Mr. Sterling is in a meeting, Ms. Mendez. Can I take a message?" Amanda hesitated. "Tell him I need to speak with him. It's important." 2 hours later, Brian showed up at her door unannounced. He wore an impeccable suit, but there were dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept. "You said it was important." His voice sounded tired, but his eyes examined her carefully, looking for signs that she was okay. "Brian, you can't just send these things without asking." Amanda gestured toward the half-empty boxes. "I'm not a charity case." He entered uninvited, closing the door behind him. "It's not charity, Amanda. It's responsibility." The intensity in his voice made her step back. "My brother abandoned you pregnant. Someone from the Sterling family needs to do the right thing. But why you?" The question came out more direct than she intended. You have your own life, your own problems. Why care so much about Ryan's mistakes? Brian walked to the window, his hands in his pockets, a posture that Amanda already recognized as his way of buying time to think. When he turned around, there was something different in his gaze, a vulnerability she had never seen before. "Because I know what it's like to be abandoned when you need someone most," he said, his voice low but full of emotion. "My mother left us when I was 17. Just walked out of the house one morning and never came back. Left a note saying she couldn't handle the pressure of being a sterling anymore." Amanda felt her heart clench. She had never heard this story. At all the family dinners, Brian's mother had always been present, elegant and affectionate. "But I saw your mother at dinners." "That's my stepmother," Brian explained, sitting down on the couch and running his hands through his hair. "My father remarried 2 years later. She's a good woman, takes care of all of us, as if we were her biological children." "But," he paused, his eyes lost in painful memories, "I never forgot what it was like to wake up that morning and find only a note. Ryan was 15, he was devastated. I had to grow up overnight, become the man of the house, take care of him." Amanda sat next to him on the couch, maintaining a respectful distance, but feeling an irresistible urge to comfort him. "Brian, I didn't know. Nobody knows. My father asked for secrecy, to protect Ryan and not to tarnish the family's reputation." Brian looked her directly in the eyes. "You're the first person I've ever told this to." The weight of this confession hung in the air between them. Amanda felt that something had changed irreversibly at that moment. Brian was no longer just Ryan's older brother, the successful and distant CEO. He was a man who carried deep wounds, who understood the pain of abandonment in a visceral way. "That's why you always took care of Ryan so much," she murmured, the pieces falling into place. "That's why you never confronted him when he messed up." Brian nodded bitterly. "I promised myself I would never let anyone I loved go through what we went through that day. Ryan never knew how to handle responsibilities because I always took them on for him." He looked at Amanda with an intensity that made her blush. "And now he's done to you exactly what our mother did to us." Amanda felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Brian." She reached out and touched his hand, a simple gesture that made them realize how physically close they were. "Thank you for telling me this, for trusting me." Her touch burned Brian's skin. He looked at their intertwined hands and felt something break inside him. All the love he had kept silent for 3 years intensified in the face of her tenderness. The way she looked at him, not with pity, but with genuine understanding. "Amanda," he said, his voice hoarse, "I need to be honest with you about something else." She stared at him, her heart beating faster. There was something in the way he pronounced her name, a dangerous intimacy that made her feel as if they were on the edge of a cliff. But before he could continue, Amanda's phone rang. It was the principal of the school where she worked, informing her that she would need to cover an extra class that afternoon. Amanda hung up reluctantly, feeling that an important moment had been interrupted. "I need to go to work," she said, still with her hand on his. "But Brian, what were you going to tell me?" He stood up abruptly, as if remembering where he was and the situation they were in. "It doesn't matter, it can wait." But his eyes said otherwise, full of a desire and tenderness that Amanda could no longer ignore. When Brian left, Amanda stood in the middle of the room, her hand still tingling where she had touched his. Something had changed between them. A line had been crossed, and as scared as she was, a part of her wanted to know how far this new dynamic would take them. 3 days later, Amanda was at the doctor's office for her first prenatal ultrasound when the contractions started. They weren't labor contractions, she knew that, but a sharp pain in her lower abdomen that made her double over in the waiting room. The nurse rushed to help her, and in a matter of minutes, Amanda was being examined by a doctor with a worried expression. Vaginal bleeding and intense cramps, the doctor murmured to the nurse. We need to monitor her. It could be a threatened miscarriage. The words hit Amanda like a punch in the stomach. She tried to get up from the examination table, but a new wave of pain forced her to lie down again. I need to call someone, she said in a trembling voice. My boyfriend. But when she dialed Ryan's number, the call went straight to voicemail. She tried 2 more times, tears starting to flow. He had blocked her number. With trembling hands, she dialed Brian. He answered on the first ring. Amanda, what's wrong? Brian, I'm at the hospital. Her voice broke. I'm bleeding and they think I might lose the baby. On the other end of the line, Brian was already grabbing his car keys. Which hospital? I'll be there in 15 minutes. You're not alone. He arrived at the hospital running, still wearing the suit from the meeting he had abandoned in the middle. He found Amanda on a gurney in the emergency room, pale and scared, with her hair stuck to her forehead with sweat. The sight of her so fragile awakened a terror in him that he didn't expect to feel. How is she? He asked the doctor, automatically assuming the role of responsible party. Are you the father? The doctor asked, looking between the two. Amanda opened her mouth to correct him, but Brian answered first. Yes. The look they exchanged was laden with meaning. Amanda felt something stir inside her chest, a gratitude so deep that it almost hurt. We managed to stabilize the bleeding, the doctor explained, but she needs absolute rest for the next few days. Any exertion, stress, or sudden movement can cause a pregnancy loss. Brian nodded gravely. What needs to be done? Bed rest, medication to relax the uterus, and constant observation. She can't be alone. The doctor looked at Amanda. Is there someone who can take care of you? Amanda hesitated. Her roommates worked all day, and she had no close family. Before she could answer, Brian said, She's going to stay at my house. I'll take care of her. During the silent drive to Brian's mansion in Lincoln Park, Amanda tried to process everything that was happening. In 1 week, her life had collapsed and been rebuilt in a way she had never imagined. And now she was going to live temporarily with the man who aroused feelings in her that she shouldn't have. The mansion was even more impressive inside than out. Marble floors, works of art on the walls, an indoor garden that looked more like an oasis. Ryan carried her in his arms to a room on the ground floor, ignoring her protests that she could walk. This was my grandmother's room when she got sick, he explained, settling her on the king-size bed. It overlooks the garden and is close to the kitchen and living room. You won't have to climb stairs. Amanda let herself be settled among the Egyptian cotton pillows, feeling like an intruder in that world of luxury. Brian, this is too much. I can stay in my apartment. Ask a friend. No. The firmness in his voice did not allow discussion. The doctor said constant observation. You almost lost your son today, Amanda. Almost lost the baby for lack of proper care. The word your echoed between them. Not Ryan's son or the baby. Your son, as if Brian had already assumed a responsibility that went beyond family obligation. That night, Brian set up a kind of camp on the armchair next to Amanda's bed. When she protested that he needed to sleep in his own bed, he was adamant. The doctor said constant observation. If you have any symptoms during the night, I need to be here. Amanda woke up at 3 in the morning with a terrible thirst. She tried to get up quietly, but Brian woke up instantly. Where are you going? His voice was rough with sleep but alert. Just want a glass of water. He got up immediately, but in the darkness he tripped over the nightstand. Amanda instinctively reached out to steady him, and suddenly the two were very close, their breaths mingling in the air. Brian put his hand on the mattress to balance himself, practically enveloping Amanda with his body. For a moment that seemed eternal, they stayed like that. She lying down, looking at him, he leaning over her, his dark eyes fixed on hers. Amanda could feel the heat emanating from his body, the masculine scent that was already becoming familiar. Brian, in turn, fought the impulse to brush away a strand of hair that had fallen over her face. "Amanda," he murmured, his voice laden with a desire he could no longer hide. She raised her hand and touched his face, a gesture so natural that both were startled by the intimacy of the moment. "I know," she whispered. "I feel it too." The words hung in the air like a dangerous confession. Brian closed his eyes, fighting against all instincts. Amanda was vulnerable, pregnant with his brother's child, dependent on his care. He couldn't take advantage of this situation. But when he opened his eyes, he saw that Amanda was looking at him with the same intensity, the same conflicting desire. Slowly, as if giving her time to back away, Brian leaned in until their lips almost touched. The kiss was inevitable, soft at first, then deeper, charged with months of repressed tension and unadmitted feelings. Amanda surrendered completely, forgetting for a moment about everything: Ryan, the pregnancy, the complications. There was only Brian and the feeling of finally being where she should be. When they broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Reality returned like a bucket of cold water. Brian pulled away abruptly, running his hands through his hair in despair. "God, Amanda, I'm so sorry. You're vulnerable and I shouldn't have..." He walked to the window, turning his back to her. "This can't happen again." Amanda sat up in bed, touching her lips still tingling from the kiss. "Brian..." "No." He turned around and she could see the internal struggle etched on his face. "You're pregnant with my brother's child. You're under my care. This is wrong on every level." But even as he said that, his eyes devoured her, contradicting every word. Amanda knew they had crossed a line from which there was no return. And as much as they tried to deny it, both knew that that kiss had changed everything between them irreversibly. In the following 5 days, Brian and Amanda created a dangerously intimate routine. He worked from home whenever possible, setting up an improvised office in the room next to hers. During meals, they talked about everything: books, architecture, childhood dreams, deep fears. Amanda discovered that Brian secretly read poetry and dreamed of building affordable housing. Brian discovered that Amanda wrote short stories in her spare time and had an extraordinary talent for understanding people. Every casual touch, when he helped her up, when she straightened his tie before a video conference, electrified the air between them. But both maintained a respectful distance, pretending that the kiss that night had been a moment of weakness that would not be repeated. On the morning of the 6th day, Amanda was feeling well enough to walk in the garden when she heard raised voices coming from Brian's office. A female voice, cold and authoritative, which she recognized as Helena Sterling's, Brian's stepmother. "This is a scandal, Brian. You brought your brother's ex-fiancée to live in your house, the woman who was abandoned at the altar." Helena's voice dripped with contempt. "People are talking. We received 3 calls from reporters yesterday. The situation is more complicated than it seems, Helena," Brian replied in a controlled voice, but Amanda could hear the tension. Amanda was feeling sick. She needed medical care. "And since when did you become a nurse?" The voice was now Alberto Sterling's, Brian's father, equally furious. "Do you know what people are saying? That you were having an affair with her during the engagement. That's why Ryan ran away." Amanda felt the blood run cold in her veins. She leaned against the wall next to the door, her heart racing. "That's ridiculous," Brian said, but his voice sounded less convincing than it should. "Amanda is a decent woman who was abandoned in a vulnerable situation. I just did what anyone with decency would do." "Anyone decent wouldn't bring their brother's ex-fiancée to live at home," Helena practically screamed. "Brian, you're the CEO of Sterling Construction. Your reputation affects the whole family, all our business. You can't afford these scandals." Besides, Alberto continued, we found out that Ryan left a letter that explains why he cancelled the wedding. The silence that followed was deafening. He says you were in love with Amanda since the first meeting, that he noticed the looks between you, the tension. He felt betrayed by his own brother. Amanda brought her hand to her mouth to stifle a gasp of shock. Ryan knew. He had always known. Where is this letter? Brian's voice was dangerously low. With me, said Helena, and it will stay with me until you resolve this situation. If this story leaks, if the newspapers find out that you were coveting your brother's fiancée, it will be the end of Sterling Construction. No respectable family in Chicago will do business with us. What do you want? Brian asked. The defeat, evident in his voice, that you send Amanda away today, that you cut off any contact with her, Alberto said categorically, and that you publicly support the version that Ryan had to travel for work and the wedding was only postponed, not cancelled. That's a lie. It's family protection, Helena retorted. Brian, you've always been responsible. You've always put the family first. Don't change now because of a whimsical situation. Amanda felt tears stinging her eyes. A whimsical situation. That's how they saw her. She retreated silently, returning to the room, where she collapsed on the bed. 20 minutes later, Brian entered the room. His face was pale, his eyes evasive. Amanda knew immediately that something had changed. Amanda, we need to talk. He sat on the armchair, maintaining physical distance. My parents, they think it would be best if you went back to your apartment. You're already feeling well. The doctor said the danger has passed. I overheard the conversation. Brian, her voice came out firmer than she felt. I heard everything. He closed his eyes, his hands tightening on the arms of the armchair. Then you know I have no choice. We always have a choice, Amanda said, getting out of bed. The question is what price we're willing to pay for it. Brian looked at her with an expression of pain that made her want to comfort him, even though her heart was breaking. Amanda, if this story leaks, if the newspapers find out He couldn't finish the sentence. It's not just my reputation. It's 5,000 jobs, dozens of families who depend on Sterling Construction. I can't put all that at risk. And Ryan knew, Amanda said softly. He always knew about your feelings. Apparently so. Brian ran his hands through his hair, the gesture she knew so well. Helena has a letter from him explaining why he cancelled the wedding. He says he felt betrayed by me. Amanda laughed bitterly. How convenient. He abandons a pregnant woman and still manages to play the victim. She began to gather her few things. It's okay, Brian, I'll leave. I'm not going to be the one to destroy the Sterling Empire. Amanda, please. He stood up, taking a step towards her, but stopped when she raised her hand. No, Brian, don't. Make this harder than it already is. She stared at him directly. These were the best days of my life. For the first time, I felt truly cared for, loved. But I understand. Family comes first. It's always been that way with you. As Amanda passed him towards the door, Brian gently held her arm. This isn't the end, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. I'll find a way to fix this, to protect you and my family. Amanda delicately pulled away from his touch. Don't make promises you can't keep, Brian. It only makes everything more painful. That afternoon, Amanda returned to her small apartment, carrying in her heart the weight of a love that had blossomed at the wrong time with the wrong person. But she didn't know that Helena Sterling had already begun to execute a more sinister plan. She had paparazzi photographers watching Brian for days and now possessed compromising images of him carrying Amanda in his arms, of the two walking intimately through the garden, of moments that could easily be interpreted in a scandalous way. The war had only just begun, and Amanda would be the first victim. A week after Amanda left the mansion, Brian tried to maintain a normal routine. But every corner of the house reminded him of her. The soft perfume that still lingered in the room, the teacup she had forgotten on, the table, the books they had read together. He worked late to avoid thinking about her, but every night he woke up with the taste of the kiss they shared. On that Thursday morning, his secretary entered the office with a worried expression. "Mr. Sterling, there's a call from the Chicago Chronicle. They say it's urgent, about a story that will air this afternoon." Brian felt a chill run down his spine. He answered the call with his heart racing. "Brian Sterling." "Mr. Sterling, this is Claudia Moore from the Chicago Chronicle. I have some photos that I would like to confirm with you before publication." The journalist's voice was professional, but Brian detected the sadistic satisfaction behind the formality. "They are images of you with Amanda Mendez, your brother Ryan Sterling's ex-fiancée. The photos show you two in quite intimate situations." Brian's world collapsed. "What kind of photos?" "You carrying her in your arms into your mansion, you two walking hand in hand through the garden, a passionate kiss on the balcony." Claudia paused dramatically. "Mr. Sterling, is it true that you were having an extramarital affair with your brother's fiancée? Is that why Ryan Sterling cancelled the wedding?" Brian hung up the phone without answering. With trembling hands, he immediately called Amanda, but the call went straight to voicemail. He called her apartment, but one of the roommates said that Amanda had left early for work. At 2 in the afternoon, the first photos began to circulate on social media. At 3, the main gossip sites in Chicago had reproduced the story. At 4, Brian's secretary informed him that 3 major clients had cancelled scheduled meetings. The photos were devastating. One showed Brian carrying Amanda in his arms the day she was sick at the hospital, but without context, it looked like a romantic encounter. Another showed them in the garden, Amanda touching his face affectionately, the moment before the kiss that should never have happened. The most damaging showed a shadow that could be interpreted as a kiss on the balcony, although it was just Brian leaning over to close a window. But the narrative constructed by the press was relentless. The Sterling scandal. Tycoon steals his own brother's fiancée. Family betrayal shakes construction empire. Amanda found out about the story when she arrived at school and found all. The colleagues whispering and looking at her with a mixture of morbid curiosity and pity. The principal called her into her office with a grave expression. "Amanda, have you seen the news?" The principal, a serious but fair woman, showed the tablet with the story open. "This is spreading very quickly." Amanda felt her legs weaken as she saw the photos. It was her and Brian, but distorted in a way that made her look like a woman, without character, who had betrayed her fiancé with her brother-in-law. "Principal, I can explain." "You don't need to explain anything to me, dear. I know your character." The older woman sighed. "But I've received calls from 3 parents of students since lunch. They are concerned. They think that a person involved in scandals should not be teaching their children." Amanda felt the world spin around her. "Are you firing me? I'm giving you paid leave until this is resolved. It's the best I can do at the moment." When Amanda left the school, there were already photographers waiting at the door. The questions came like bursts of machine gun fire. "Amanda, is it true that you were cheating on Ryan with Brian? Which brother is the baby's father? How much is Brian paying you to keep quiet?" She ran to the first taxi she saw, but it was already too late. The photos of her leaving the school with a devastated face would be on the websites in an hour. In the apartment, she found her roommates packing their bags. "Amanda, I'm so sorry," said Carla, avoiding looking her in the eyes. "But we can't afford to have our reputation tarnished by association. My family is already pressuring me." "Besides," added Julia, "they're saying you're pregnant. That makes everything even more complicated." Amanda locked herself in her room, and finally saw the full extent of the damage. Social media was in a frenzy. Her photo was being shared with cruel comments. Opportunist, homewrecker, womb raider. The most painful thing was seeing how they distorted the story. Brian appeared as the rich and powerful man who had taken advantage of a situation, and she as the woman who had seduced two brothers. Her phone rang non-stop. Journalists, curious people, even some lewd suitors who offered to console her. Amanda turned off the device and curled up in bed. Meanwhile, at Sterling Construction, Brian faced an emergency meeting with the board of directors. The older men, minority partners in the company, were furious. "Brian, this is unacceptable," said Maurice Campbell, the oldest partner. "Our company has always been guided by seriousness, by family values. How are we going to close deals with traditional families now? We've already received calls from 5 clients canceling projects," added another member. "That represents 40 million in lost contracts." Alberto Sterling, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Brian, you have 48 hours to resolve this situation. Either you temporarily step down from the presidency of the company until the scandal passes, or we vote for your dismissal." Helena, who was present as a minority shareholder, smiled discreetly. Her plan was working perfectly. That night, Brian drove to Amanda's apartment but found only a note taped to the door. "Apartment available for rent. Tenant moved out." Amanda had disappeared, taking only a suitcase with the essentials. She could no longer bear to be the center of a scandal that had destroyed Brian's life and threatened to destroy everything he had worked for. The only thing she left behind was a letter. "Brian, I can no longer be the cause of the destruction of your life and your family. What we had was real and beautiful, but it was also a mistake that is costing too much for everyone. I'm going to a place where I can start over, away from the spotlight, away from you. Please don't look for me. Some love stories are simply not possible. Amanda." Brian held the letter with trembling hands, feeling that he had lost not only Amanda, but also himself. In 1 week, he had lost the love of his life, his reputation, and possibly his company. And the worst thing was knowing that in some way, all of this was part of a larger plan to separate them definitively. 3 weeks had passed since Amanda disappeared, and Brian felt like he was living in hell. Sterling Construction lost contracts daily. The newspapers continued to speculate about the whereabouts of the pregnant mistress, and he couldn't sleep more than 2 hours a night. He'd hired 2 private investigators to find her, but Amanda seemed to have evaporated. It was on a rainy Friday afternoon that Brian received an unexpected call. "Mr. Sterling, this is Carla, Amanda's roommate." The young woman's voice sounded nervous. "We need to talk. It's about the photos that came out in the press." Brian felt his heart race. "Do you know where she is?" "No, but I know who set this trap for you two. Can we meet?" An hour later, Brian was at a discreet cafe in the North Side, listening to Carla reveal details that left him with boiling blood. A couple of days before the photos leaked, an elegant woman appeared here at the apartment. She said she was Helena Sterling, your stepmother. She offered money for Julia and me to leave home when the news came out. "Helena was at your apartment?" Brian struggled to keep his voice controlled. "Yes. She said it was to protect our reputation, but now I understand that it was to leave Amanda even more isolated." Carla stirred nervously in her coffee. "But there's more. She asked about your routine, what time Amanda left for work, if you talked a lot. She was the one who gave the information to the photographers to get the images." Brian clenched his fists on the table. Helena had orchestrated everything from the beginning. "Is there anything else?" "There is, yes. On the day Amanda disappeared, she received a call. I heard part of the conversation through the bedroom door." Carla lowered her voice. Someone told her that they had evidence that you two were planning this scandal together since before the wedding was cancelled, that if she didn't disappear, they would divulge that the baby was yours, not Ryan's. Brian's world stopped. Who made that call? A woman's voice, but disguised. She said that if Amanda didn't disappear in 24 hours, they would destroy not only her reputation, but also make sure she lost custody of the baby when it was born, claiming she was a characterless opportunist. Brian felt an anger so intense that he had to get up from the table to not explode. Helena had not only staged the scandal, she had used Amanda's motherhood as a weapon, threatening her most vulnerable point. Carla, did you record any of these conversations? Do you have any evidence? The young woman hesitated, then took her cell phone out of her bag. I recorded the call that Amanda received. She was so desperate that she didn't even realize I was listening. Carla played the audio, and Brian heard a female voice, clearly disguised, making the threats that Carla had described. That same night, Brian convened an emergency meeting with his lawyer, Richard Ellis, one of the few friends who had remained by his side during the crisis. Together, they began to put together a plan to expose Helena. "We need more evidence," said Richard after hearing the audio. "This recording shows blackmail, but we need to connect Helena to the photos and the smear campaign." "Leave it to me," Brian replied, with a cold determination that he hadn't felt in weeks. "I'm going to make Helena confess." The next day, Brian set a trap. He invited Helena to dinner at his house, claiming that he wanted to discuss strategies to save the company. During dinner, with the recorder discreetly installed, he began to pressure her. "Helena, I need to know who leaked those photos," he said, feigning despair. "If I find out who it was, I can sue for invasion of privacy, maybe reverse some of the damage." Helena took a sip of wine, her eyes shining with ill-disguised satisfaction. "Brian, maybe it's best to accept that some situations have no return. Amanda was a problem, and problems need to be solved." "You speak as if you know something I don't," Brian provoked her. "I know that girl was manipulating you from day one," Helena replied, the mask of the concerned stepmother finally falling. "I saw how she looked at you at family dinners, how you behaved around her. It was clear that she was planning to trade up to the Sterling brother as soon as she had the chance." Brian felt his stomach churn, but maintained his composure. "And how did you come to this conclusion?" "Brian, honey, do you think I'm an idiot? I hired investigators to follow you 2 weeks before the wedding was cancelled. The photos that came out in the press. I have dozens of others, of much more compromising moments." Helena smiled coldly, "including some from the day you kissed on the balcony." Brian's blood ran cold. "You spied on us. I protected our family," Helena exclaimed, finally revealing her true nature. "That opportunist was destroying everything we built. First she seduced Ryan, then you, and the baby. Who guarantees that?" "It's even Ryan's. It could very well be yours." Brian got up from the table, disgust evident on his face. "You destroyed the life of an innocent woman out of paranoia and prejudice." "I saved Sterling Construction," Helena shouted, "and I'm going to keep saving it. Amanda Mendez will never appear in this family's life again. I personally guarantee it." At that moment, Brian knew he had everything he needed. Helena had confessed not only to having orchestrated the scandal, but also to having directly threatened Amanda. Now he had the weapons necessary for the war he was about to declare. But first, he needed to find Amanda, and he knew exactly where to start looking. Brian spent the night analyzing every word of Helena's recorded confession, every detail of the investigations she had hired. At dawn, he had a plan. He called Richard at 6 in the morning. "I need you to prepare a press conference for this afternoon," Brian said, "and find Amanda. If she's pregnant and without money, she must be somewhere cheap, but not too far from Chicago. probably in a small town upstate where she can go unnoticed. At 10 in the morning, Richard called back. I found her. She's in Lake Geneva, working as an attendant at a small inn. Brian, she's okay, but it seems like she doesn't want to be found. It doesn't matter what she wants, Brian replied, already grabbing his car keys. She needs to know the truth. The trip to Lake Geneva never seemed so long. Brian rehearsed mentally what he would say, how he would explain that everything had been a setup, how he would apologize for not having protected her from the beginning. When he arrived at the rustic inn in the center of town, his heart was beating so hard it hurt. Amanda was in the inn's garden, sweeping dry leaves. The belly was already visible under the simple apron she wore. The hair was longer, tied in a disheveled ponytail, but she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. When she saw him, her face went through a sequence of emotions: surprise, pain, anger, and finally, a coldness he had never seen before. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out colder than the mountain wind. "Amanda, I need you to listen to me. I found out who set us up." Brian approached slowly, as if she were a frightened animal that could run away at any moment. "It was Helena. She hired photographers, manipulated the images. She was the one who threatened you on the phone." Amanda dropped the broom and turned completely to him. "And does that change anything?" "She may have set it up, Brian, but the feelings were real. We betrayed Ryan, even if he was a jerk." "No," Brian said firmly. "Ryan knew about my feelings from the beginning. He told me in a letter he left with Helena. He used you, Amanda, as he always used everyone in his life." Tears began to run down Amanda's face, but she maintained her rigid posture. "Even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact that I destroyed your life, your company, your reputation, your family." "You didn't destroy anything." Brian held her arms gently. "Helena destroyed everything because she was afraid that I would find happiness with someone she couldn't control. But I have proof now, Amanda. I have her confession recorded." Amanda looked at him suspiciously. "What confession?" Brian took his cell phone out of his pocket and played the audio from the previous night. As Helena's venomous words filled the air, Amanda turned pale. When the audio ended, she collapsed into a wooden chair in the garden. "My God," she whispered. "She planned everything from the beginning. And this afternoon, at 5 o'clock, I'm going to expose everything at a press conference." Brian knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "But first, I need you to forgive me for not protecting you from day one, for letting family pressures make me doubt what I felt, for allowing you to go through this alone." Amanda withdrew one of her hands and touched his face. "Brian, even if you expose Helena, that won't erase what happened. People will always remember the scandal. Your family will never accept me." "Then let them not accept you," Brian said with an intensity that surprised her. "Amanda, I spent 3 weeks in hell without you. I woke up every night dreaming of your face, of the way you smiled when you read to me, of the taste of our kiss. I don't care anymore what people will say or think. The only thing I care about is you and this baby." "Brian!" Amanda tried to protest, but he continued. "I love you, Amanda. I've loved you since the first time I saw you at the Sterling construction party 3 years ago. I love you when you get angry and frown. I love you when you sing softly. While cooking, I love you pregnant and radiant, even when you're scared." He held both of her hands firmly. "And if you give me a chance, I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that this love is real and worth all the obstacles we face." The tears now ran freely down Amanda's face. "What if your family disowns you? What if the company goes bankrupt? What if—" Brian silenced her with a soft kiss, charged with all the longing and despair of the last few weeks. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead on hers. "Then we rebuild everything from scratch. You and me, and our child." "Brian, the baby isn't yours." "Yes, it is," he said without hesitation. "Maybe not biologically, but it's going to be mine in every aspect that matters. I'm going to be in the delivery room when he's born. I'm going to teach him to ride a bike. I'm going to help him with his homework. I'm going to scare him when he brings girlfriends home." Amanda laughed in the middle of her tears. "If you let me, this baby will have the most dedicated father in the world." That afternoon, at 5 o'clock sharp, Brian was in front of a sea of journalists in the auditorium of Sterling Construction. His hands no longer trembled. He knew exactly what he needed to do. Amanda was in the front row, wearing a navy blue dress that Brian had bought for her on the trip back from Lake Geneva. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," Brian began, his voice clear and firm, "you have been called here to hear the truth about what the media has called the Sterling scandal." He paused, looking directly at the cameras. "During the last few weeks, an innocent woman has been slandered, defamed, and persecuted by a distorted version of the facts. Today, I have irrefutable evidence that everything was a setup." Brian played the first audio, Helena's confession admitting to having hired photographers and manipulated the situation. The murmur in the audience was immediate. Then, he played the recording of the threats made to Amanda and finally presented emails that Richard had obtained between Helena and the photographer who took the images. "Amanda Mendez," Brian said, looking directly at her, "is a dedicated teacher who was abandoned pregnant by my brother Ryan Sterling. When she needed medical care, I helped her because it was the right thing to do. And yes, I fell in love with her. But that happened after she was already free, after Ryan had already run away from his responsibilities." A journalist raised his hand. "Mr. Sterling, to what do you attribute your stepmother's actions?" Brian took a deep breath. "Helena Sterling will be criminally prosecuted for defamation, invasion of privacy, and blackmail. But her motivations are less important than the consequences of her actions. A pregnant woman was forced into hiding, lost her job, was publicly humiliated, all out of paranoia and prejudice." Another reporter asked, "Do you intend to marry Amanda Mendez?" Brian smiled for the first time in weeks. "If she accepts, yes. And I will raise the child she is expecting as if it were my own blood." After the press conference, when the last journalists left, Amanda approached Brian on the stage. "It was brave," she said, "and dangerous. You may have lost your family. For good." "I gained a new family," Brian replied, wrapping his arms around her. "The family I chose, not the one that was imposed on me." 6 months later, in an intimate ceremony in a chapel in Lake Geneva, Brian Sterling and Amanda Mendez were married. She was 8 months pregnant, radiant in an adapted wedding dress that highlighted her belly. Brian couldn't stop smiling. Alberto Sterling, after weeks of reflection and a long conversation with his son, was present, having reconciled with Brian and apologized to Amanda. Helena had been removed from the family and faced criminal prosecution. 3 weeks after the wedding, Amanda went into labor. Brian held her hand during all 16 hours of labor, whispering words of encouragement and love. When Peter Sterling Mendez finally came into the world, crying loudly and healthy, Brian cried along. "He has your eyes," Amanda said, exhausted, but happy, placing the baby in Brian's arms. "He has your kind heart," Brian replied, kissing his son's forehead and then his wife's. "And he'll grow up knowing that true love always wins, even when the whole world is against it." 2 years later, Sterling Construction had not only recovered from the scandal, but thrived under Brian's new philosophy of building quality, affordable housing. Amanda had returned to teaching, now in a private school that she and Brian had founded for underprivileged children. And every night after Peter fell asleep, Brian and Amanda sat in the garden of the house they had built together, remembering. that the greatest loves often arise in the most unlikely moments, and that it is worth fighting for them against all odds.